So, two things I was going to do today. Part one is go over a little bit of a sneak peek, part of the uh, NLP 10X life coaching course. 10X, I'm calling it the NLP based 10X life coaching course. And the NLP stands for No Limit People. It's going to be a lot of fun. So it's kind of a sneak peek of one of the modules in it. And then then I'll stop the recording, do a different recording on one of the most powerful hypnotic scripts I've ever come across. Well, I created it, but I've come across and tweaked, right? And I forgot about it. It came back. So we'll be doing that in the second part. So let's get started because I like talking about this. So one of the modules in the NLP 10X life coaching is life by design. What do I mean by life by design? I mean, well, yesterday I did a little post about how, or the other day, so many coaches get one thing wrong, which drives me nuts, which is, it's kind of especially in the internet marketing world, it's the idea that if, we'll monetize your passion. We'll take your passion, basically monetize this, monetize that. But, if you really have your passion, it can drive you to success. Well, that's a false belief. And I'll get to why that is necessarily, because that's assuming you only have one belief, one passion, rather, that you really want to accomplish. So like if you're one of the select few that from time you were a little kid to, mid-career, you only wanted to be whatever it was, a heart surgeon or a truck driver, and then you became it, well, good for you. But that's less than 20% of the people. Most people have the opposite problem where they have more than one passion. Right? And I heard one person point out, not all your passions were meant to be monetized. That goes against the internet marketing world, right? And I'll talk about that. But the story I always say is a friend of mine really loved martial arts, train all the time, go to tournaments, had a great time. Had an insurance business, if I remember right, and was quite successful at it. And then he got bought out, so then I had time. So he bought the dojo where we were training at the time, because that guy wanted to retire. And he was quite successful with it, except he'd always sit there and say, it's not as much fun as it used to be, because now it was his profession. And you think about it differently when it's your profession as opposed to when it's your hobby, your avocation versus a vocation. And so it was one of those interesting ones, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But let's talk about design thinking. When this is how you take like designed thinking into life coaching, because life coaching a little bit different from a lot of the coaches don't separate out what they do. They'll coach you on anything, which I always find fascinating, because how do you coach everybody on everything, right? But some people claim to do that. But design thinking is taking how designers, people that really study how to design and create things, how they think into what we're doing. And to look at that, there's when you take design thinking into this, that's where you get those false beliefs. And the first false belief I talked about was the idea that you only have one passion, right? Right. And once you find that, it's a hot road in, But again, how many and we'll go do an exercise real quick that'll show you have multiple passions, that different things in your life that could make you make your life just as meaningful. I see this a lot in the personal coaching world, So the false belief is this whole idea about passion. You only got one. Sorry about that. You only got one passion, right? You got many passions. And so, and again, kind of with that, the second false belief that falls with it is, the second one is you should know by now. In other words, it's like you're late for something. I know Dr. Albert runs into that where people say, you know, I want to be an actor, but it's too late. Yeah, you never see people of all ages, you know, on Broadway or in television or in movies. Yes, you do. You see all ages all the time, right? I always want to be a writer, but it's too late for me to write a book. Right? The name escapes me of someone who didn't write their book, their first book till they were in their 60s, right? But it's the whole idea. Again, you combine, you know, like someone will say, you know, if you know your passion, come to the front of the line, I can help you. If you don't know, go back to the end of the line until you figure out what your passion is, right? And the second one is then people think that they should know it. They should know what they want, which goes with your passion, and also that it's too late to do whatever it is I want to do. Right? Now we're in a unique field as personal coaches, hypnotists, helpers, even sometimes in the my clinical fields, alcohol and drug counseling and psychology. It's not unusual to see mid-level people, mid-age and even a little bit older, come into the field as a second career, right? Or as an adjunct, right? And Albert said there was somebody in his PhD program in their 80s, right? But again, that's part of the Western culture of we worship youth, right? And we think we should know, but there's that whole thing by your mid-20s, you should know what you want to do. And generally, even though it's changing, you get your family going, things like that. So these are some of the false beliefs we have to overcome. But one of my favorites is this crap about, are you being the best version of you? Are you the best version of you? And basically that gets into perfectionism, right? But that has the same false beliefs as some of the other things, which is that's assuming there's only one good version of you, right? But it stops. If you get into this also starts the idea of, you're successful at one thing, right? But you're ready to do something else. Well, you might think it's too late to change, which will stop you, right? And then somebody will say, but, you didn't go to school to get a doctorate in psychology to become a hypnotist, did you? Right? What does one have to do with the other? But I mean, it's this whole thing about the best version of you, right? And there's a thing in business about, and I'll screw up the quote, but good is the enemy of best. And we want best practices. Good enough is the enemy of best in business. So we want best practices, right? Which sounds good. But again, what that begins to do for us is then you begin to think that the one unobtainable best, if you go after the one unattainable best, it becomes the enemy of all the available better or good enough. Because whatever's better or good enough today can get better and better and better. But how many of us won't even start because we're going after that perfectionism, right? And so this, since it's a life coaching course, we'll be talking about, we get caught up in it. That's what people call us for, right? And I think the number one reason I used to talk to people about this is I kind of call it connecting the dots, right? Basically, especially people in mid-career, midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it, right? They call us because they want their life to have more meaning. Okay? They want their life to have more meaning. Okay? In fact, I've seen a lot of people in our field, sell people into taking hypnosis and NLP training and master training and trainers training, just because they know the person they're talking to is searching for something, right? And that's one way to approach it, but they're just calling because they don't think their life has meaning, right? But there's this process you could go through that if you do it, it will lead to a happier life for you and your clients, right? And basically, it's a thing of this, basically, right? Who you are, right? What you believe, right? And what do you do? This is mainly for like work, right? Or profession, right? When you can connect it, two things basically with what you believe and what you do and tie it into who you are, that will lead to a great quality of life, of feeling good about yourself, of having meaning. And it doesn't mean you have to, win the Pulitzer Prize or the Nobel Peace Prize or impact great swaths of humanity. You can live just as an impactful life internally by, if you know what you really believe, right? And you help the person figure out what they believe and what do they do for work now? And is there anything in what they do now that they can access this? And of course, who you are. And of course, the biggest conflict we get, and I still get when I get people, is who they are is conflicting with what they do. That's a recipe for unhappiness, and either they have to change, who they are, what they believe to do it, and some of us have seen people do that, right? And so this is what we want to begin to look at, right? Helping our clients connect. What do they believe? What do they believe about life, about work, right? About relationships, right? What do they believe about work? What are they doing now? What do they believe about it? Is it, is there levels of enjoyment, right? You can love what you do, but do you love absolutely everything about it? Right? And then maybe it's time to change when the pain outweighs the pleasure, right? I was watching an interview with a retired football player, Barry Sanders, right, who retired at the top of his game. If you're a football fan, he's at the top of his game doing this and that, right? And he would talk about, it's who he was. He was a football player. He loved it. What he believed. He believed he loved, what he did was play football, right? But what began to change in him was he enjoyed for many years every aspect of the game, the preseason, working out, getting in shape, getting his game better, and it offset the negatives, right? And then he goes, after the last year he played, he just woke up and he said, suddenly the idea of getting hit by an NFL linebacker weighed more on my mind than playing another game. And it's easy for none of us here, even if you played sports, you probably couldn't imagine what it'd be like to be hit by an NFL level professional football player. Even the little guys, they're in the best of the world at what they do, right? And if Jeff Neal was here, ask him to explain what it's like to be hit by a professional fighter, right? It's much, so a lot of times people reach out when they're in this thing, Maybe they want to change what they do for work, but maybe what we do is reframe what they're doing for work now, right? But it leads to another idea, which is, kind of goes back up to this passion. How many lives, do you have? They say, the physicists and all these people, these really smart people, the really, really smart people. I'm not one of them, but the really smart people talk about, this whole idea of the multiverse is real. right? That there's different versions of you in different universes doing different things, right? So how can you look at that, right? So what if you take a process of, what if you look at what you're doing right now? Get a different pen, hold on. So look at like what you're doing now, and you run it out like 3 years, right? And everything goes great, right? You start making the money you want, things are going good. I mean, what you're doing right now, it just improves, right? And you run that out for a couple years, right? So you can step into that, right? And then you can even throw in a few of those bucket list things, right? Oh, I want to go to Europe. I want to go to the Antarctica. I want to do something cool, right? So the first step is you take what you're doing now and you run it out like 3 years. Okay. Then you take it and you look at what if what you're doing now, and this one's easy for us, it's over. You can't do what you were doing anymore. AI, the robots, how many professions have we seen disappear in the last 20 years? I mean, it's just gone, right? And your profession is just different. Right? I mean, I'm going through it with the whole training thing. It's, you know, the internet changed it, and then, you know, and now AI is changing it again. I mean, but it's over, right? So there's no future in what you're doing now. And maybe not today it's over, but you could see in the future that in a very short time frame, it's over. You know, you're not going to be a typesetter at a newspaper, you know, which at one point was a very highly paid position. There's guys that could do that. Well, it's over, right? And so how many people get stuck because they want to keep doing what they're doing even though it's over? You know, so they have to begin to look at what can they do, right? And then if you take the third step after you've done those two, this one's kind of painful. And you do the third step is, what would you do if everything worked out great, perfect, right? Money's not an issue. Other people's judgments no longer appropriate. A lot of people would make changes, but, you know, what would their family say? I remember talking to a person, and he was a heart surgeon, right? And he was quite successful. He made a lot of money, and he was smart. He saved it. And he was like, I don't know, 50. And he sold his practice or got rid of his practice and became a truck driver. Bought an 18-wheeler, went and got a CDL license, started to be a truck driver. And, you know, he said the hardest part was what all of the people he used to hang out with, what they thought of him. You know, how could you give up? You know, you were a Yale type MD with, you know, you were a heart surgeon, a cardiac surgeon with this great practice, and you became a truck driver, you know? But when you talk when you talk to him, and he had been a truck driver for 4 or 5 years at that point. I remember him saying in the talk that he was having more fun, seeing more of the world, and, you know, his girlfriend at the time was in the truck with him. They were driving everywhere doing this. He goes, I haven't had a life like this since my first couple of years after I got out of residence. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. They go, didn't you enjoy being a heart surgeon? He goes, have you ever had a small child die on the table? You got to walk out and tell the parents? And he goes, now I drive a truck. So it was kind of interesting, right? So what would you do if your life was perfect, right? What would you do if money wasn't an issue, other people's issues? And then if you run that out 3 years, right? And what begins to happen, there's some things here that maybe you could put into your life now, right? So you could help people make those type of things. But let's say somebody wants to make a change in their life, right? They're here or here, and they want to redesign their life. How do you do that? Well, the first thing you do is you basically, what if you prototype your life? Prototype your life. Prototype the life you want. And the easiest way to do that is find someone, as we would call it, model, who has what you want. And ask them, how the hell did you do that? You know, talk to others who have it. Right? And so the first step is to just have the one guy that came up with it called the prototype conversations. So, you know, Dr. John, how did you become a business consultant? Or, you know, Carla, how did you become a energy healer? Da, da, da. And just ask, talk to, most people will tell you if you ask them, you know, buy them a cup of coffee and they'll tell you, right? How did you become this? What did you do? You know, if you were going to do it again, what would you do different? And people will give you all this information. So you could gather information from people that are already doing it. Well, I was exposed to this. And so when I started, you know, you guys know me, I self-disclose too much. You know, what I'm doing now, I love I'm a trainer, you know, I still do some coaching. Right? That, right. And a little bit of consulting. Addiction, I do that. I can run that out, but also part of me knows a lot of it. It's over. It's ending. How long will people be doing what we're doing, what I'm doing right now? Right? How before it's replaced with, and we saw it happen in 2020 when COVID hit, where people that didn't think they would ever be doing stuff online started doing stuff online. Right? And we're seeing it at the conferences. In 2012, 13, the National Guild had over 1,000 attendees, not counting the speakers. Right? Things are changing. It's, you know, eventually it's going to be over. You know, AI, it's just the changing technology will change everything. Right? So I can keep doing what I'm doing, but eventually that train's pulling into the station. So if I looked at, you know, and with this, I was doing certain things as avocations or hobbies that I enjoy. You know, my acting and theater, community, regional, a lot of dinner theater, right? So semi-professional, professional. And so when I started thinking, well, if this is ending, plus at the time I had more money, I hadn't blown it on a different project yet. So I started thinking about, well, if money was no object, what would I do? Well, I'd want to get more into acting. So I started talking to people that had transitioned into being an actor later or back into it later in life. How did you do it? Well, you have to start taking, and I think when you do this, magic happens. Right? Magic happens. You start, you know, so I started taking classes at a professional level again, right? And then I started doing some like stepping into it, like futuring it. I went and I worked on a couple of films. See, do I really like this? Because I wouldn't want to commit to it and then decide I don't like it. Right? So, you know, it's not like joining the military. You could like jump in a little bit and see if you like it. And so, you know, I worked on some sets. I've done some professional theater, you know, where I got paid and that. And I enjoyed it. Now, and it let me see it in a realistic version. Right. And so, you know, so I began to explore it that way. Right. And so again, you can have conversations with people that are doing it. And realizing that there are people out there now living the future you want. Right? And only by opening yourself up to it do you begin to get there. Right? And so once that happens, you know, magic begins to happen. Right? Magic begins to happen. Right? And realizing that when some of these happen, when you really do it honestly, it will bring up, the only term I would have for it is unsolvable problems. Dr. Bennett, guy from Stanford, calls them gravity problems. It's just there. I want to I'll just self-disclose. I want to become an actor. I want to do this stuff again. I want to do that. Okay, great. I could prototype, talk to people doing it. I've done a little bit of it. I like it. Or there's some gravity or unsolvable things, right? I'm not going to get into an action movie as a lead. There's certain just the business. I'm not going to can't play the young romantic lead, right? It's different. Not that I can't act, or be, there's probably romantic parts, but it won't be it's the mature people, You're the widower, whatever. So that's unsolvable, right? But if you can come to terms with that, and acceptance is key, right? Acceptance is key, and then accepting the truth. All change starts with the truth. Well, but I can still act. I could do all these, I played serial killers. I was a lawyer. Played a cop several times so far on film. Played a doctor 3 times. That's a stretch. And it's fun, but that, I have to accept the truth, because all change starts with the truth, right? So, and then once you make that choice, if you're really going to jump in, you have to make a choice non-reversible. Because the problem that happens if you have a reversible choice, you're never all in. Michael Jordan used to say, once he makes a decision, he never looked at the decision again. And if you keep, and that's what happens to us, right? We keep rehashing the decision, right? And I think that we're kind of lucky, right? Kind of lucky. And to steal from my dear friend, I would be doing anchoring technique. My dear friend, Diamond Diller there, the thing about luck, right? That there was a study done, the one I like, is about lucky. And there was a guy who ran, I can't think of his name, but he ran Zappos, the one that sold to Amazon. Well, part of his pre-employment thing is he gave you a test. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how lucky are you? 1, 2, 3, you're not lucky. 8, 9, 10, you're very lucky. He would only hire people 7, 8, 9, or 10 that consider themselves lucky. Right? Some people wonder if that's legal, but I mean, it's America. You don't have to hire people if you don't want to. It's just kind of like you could probably bury it in a psych interview and nobody could question it. But he only hired lucky people. Because people that think they're lucky, as Bruce would tell you, they're more lucky, right? And they did a study, I think it was at Stanford, where, the experiment was they brought you in and they said, we're going to give you $150 if you take this test. Here's the test. You're going to read, the front section of the New York Times or the San Francisco Examiner, one of the big newspapers, and count all the pictures or count the headlines, depending on the control group, right? And then once you finish, count them up, come in, tell us if you're right, you get $100. So it's graduate school, so college kids are doing it. But if anybody's been around that kind of a campus, you know that what they tell you the study's about is not what the study's about, right? That's just, it's going to be something different. And what the study really was about is, as I handed Dr. John, here it is, look at the headlines, count the headlines, and when you get it, get your 150. Now, as you're reading it, if you read into the article just a little bit, it said, you've completed this project, collect an extra $150. And what they found was the people that rated themselves lucky were 80% more likely to notice that little statement in the article, right? That Experiment's over. You won. Get an extra $150. Now the other people, since they're graduate students, I think it was Stanford. They're smart. Almost all of them qualified, and they got at least got the $100, but they left the big money on the table because their peripheral vision wasn't wide enough to take in all the opportunities in front of it, right? And so there's that thing about deciding that you're lucky means that you're lucky, right? And so, and I always tell people when they reach out to me is that you're lucky, right? You're one of the few. How many people, there's no number for this, I could just make shit up, but I don't think there's a number. How many people think about making a change but never make the change? Never take the first step. I used to call them the Oprah people. They'd sit on the couch watching Oprah when she was big and she would give all these wonderful speakers and, from metaphysical to physical. I mean, but people go, I'm going to do that tomorrow. Then the next day, there's another option. And now, again, we go into that. There's too many choices, right? Well, do I study law of attraction? Do I study, subconscious reprogramming? Do I study this? And you don't do anything. But most people, the few are the ones that reach out and start whatever it is that they're going to do. And as we say in recovery, which I think is true in everything, the hardest step is the first step. Just saying, I got a problem, I want to fix it. I want to look at my life different. And so, so I always would stress to people, well, you're already lucky, but maybe you start thinking about you're lucky. In my personal recovery groups, I always say, I'm one of the luckiest men alive. First of all, I'm alive. What are the odds? Right? 200 years ago, I can just look at the general age of my group. We'd all be dead by now. It's like, people didn't live that long, right? So, and I've been through some things, right? And so, and then when I hit them with the idea of whatever I'm going to do, give them the deal, I would always throw in, here's a magic statement. You know what I found, and the research proves this? You're not happy about a decision until you make the decision. So make the decision now. And that's just true. All the research says, when you leave a decision hanging, you're not happy. Either make the decision. Right? And as Dr. John, if it's do it, great. If it's not do it, that's okay too. I'm not going to start the language pattern flips that I've seen people do. It's like, you won't be happy till you make the decision, one way or the other. So, so what we want to do with our clients is help them connect the dots. Right? Connect the dots, make their lives meaningful. That's what people want, right? Give them some options. And you can do this for yourself. And then when we do the class, the whole thing will be about doing it, right? To prototype the life you want. Right? And then choose. You're only happy once you make the decision. Yeah, I took notes. This is part of like a sneak peek into one of the subsections of NLP 10X life coaching course, right? 10X NLP life coaching course. So if you want information about that, go to hortonpsychology.com. It's there, or drwillhorton.com. It's the same site. Go there. I'm working at tweaking that up, but it's going to be the 4 Sundays in September from 10 a.m. to like 3 p.m. But it's very experiential in nature, just like I teach NLP or hypnosis. It's not theory. You're going to be doing the exercises. So then if you you're going to become an NLP life coach, you'll have been through the process and walked another person through the process. So you actually have that. And of course, it'll be recorded. So if you have any questions, reach out.